Your Royal Highness, dear guests and colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation. It is my great pleasure to speak here today. I will talk about the Oman Botanic Garden as a case study for botanic garden construction and how it can drive environmental restoration. The Oman Botanic Garden is a garden currently under construction and will open in a couple of years. Just for those who haven't been to Oman, Oman is in the Arabian Peninsula in the southeast, and the capital, Muscat, is in the north, and this is where the Oman Botanic Garden lies. In my presentation, I will take you through the processes we've been so far through with regards today to site restoration and site protection. And in my presentation, I will talk about the challenges, both those we've met and the challenges we are currently facing, and how we are tackling our task in the garden. First of all, a short overview about environmental restoration projects in Oman. I actually first was afraid I would need to leave that slide empty, but there are a couple of small projects which currently take place in the country. And I will not go into detail, but there's environmental restoration projects with regards to oil production areas, with regards to hydrocarbon cleaning up, planting native trees and removal of invasives. Most of those projects are rather small scale, and they would benefit from being better coordinated and better thought through, but nevertheless it shows that there are some institutions and entities in the countries that are thinking, or have started to think about environmental restoration and protection. Well, the Oman Botanic Garden, and this is our nursery on site, is a garden which has been created through the direction of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos. This is the garden site. As you can tell, it is an awe-inspiring site, 420 hectares, very big, and this is how the site looked like in 2006 before development and construction started. The garden is very rich in botanical habitats and has about 8% of the total flora of the country. A lot of the area is gently undulating hills, but you also have seen the steep backdrop of the garden, which provides a stunning frame for its landscapes. In the garden, we want to create a global identity, and for this it is very important of how the place looks like and how it feels. It's not only the botanical content as such, but it is the larger picture which is very important for the identity of the garden. In the garden, we seek to show the total flora of the country, show all plants from the tiny to the dramatic to the beautiful in carefully created naturalistic habitats. And there are 8 main habitats which we will show, from the cloud forest in southern Oman. This is the picture on the upper corner, a vegetation unique on a global scale, to the cold juniper forest in the northern mountains, to lush and green wadi systems, the baking sand desert. Our visitors will be able to explore all of these main habitats in one place, in one day. We want to show the wonders of Oman and how beautiful the plant diversity and the landscapes of Oman are. Let me go back. And to be successful, it is very important that we entice our visitors and encouraging them to return again, while the garden needs to stay true to its values. The garden should be a place of real discovery, and all aspects of visiting the garden should be beautiful. We want to offer our visitors a very immersive experience so that the visitors get a true flavor of how Oman is, how the habitats are, the desert at night. We've heard about the starry skies earlier today. And so that our visitors, while having a wonderful day or a wonderful evening in the garden, also learn, not realizing it, but this is part of the interpretation, part of the journey when our visitors visit the garden. So the overall visitor experience is absolutely critical for us. There is an element of theatre and entertainment because this is how our visitors will probably easily take in what we really want to tell them about the country, biodiversity and its landscapes. This is how one of our biomes will look like. I didn't mention earlier that two of the more fragile habitats, the cloud forest from southern Amman and the juniper mountains of northern Amman, cannot be shown outside because we've got up to 50 degrees in the summer, so those plants would not survive there. For those plants we will have big biomes, several thousand square meters, and you can easily tell that this is a pretty big challenge with regards to architecture, to botany, horticulture, engineering, landscape architecture. And these buildings are not yet under construction. They're currently under design, but construction will start very soon. All the other habitats will be external habitats. The garden also wants to be a true reflection of the country, of its tranquility and its beauty. And to build up the collection, we have conducted hundreds or thousands of field collection expeditions throughout the country since 2006 because our plants are not available anywhere. So we have collected millions of seeds, cuttings as well. You can also see an example of our tree rescue program where we rescue large mature specimens, some of them several hundred years old, and these are all plants which otherwise would be destroyed due to construction processes. So we do not go out and just dig up what we need, but we only rescue mature species and specimens which otherwise would be lost. We have created very tight processes and procedures to make sure that we have orderly processes for the collection. The propagation material then goes to our nursery on site. It is a very large collection, very well documented, and we are continuously extending. We already had to build 2 satellite nurseries as well, and our plants are growing quite rapidly. We also in the garden want to show the rich botanical heritage which still exists in the country, so that because the garden will be the place where plants and people meet, and our visitors should be able to easily connect to the garden and to what the garden will show them. So how does this link to site protection, and what are the concepts and principles which are important for us? Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves the question, why do we need protection? And this means protection of the garden site. And here I'd like to start the thinking process with a statement which probably holds true for any country and any construction project all over the world. So why protection? Well, we have precious and fragile landscapes with development pressures. The Oman Botanic Garden is at the doorstep of the capital, so which means it's already 1.5 million people living in the area, and in future that the area will become even more important for the people of the capital for leisure and relaxation. We all know that arid landscapes are very slow to heal. There's rich geological interest on the site. We just recently found, or rather geologists recently found, dinosaur bones. It's the only location in Oman where dinosaur bones have been found, and one of the few in the Arabian Peninsula, so everyone is very excited about that. As I already said, the garden is rich in native flora, and it is very important to think about protection because it is a constant reminder that this site is special and worthy of sensitive treatment and of protection. We aim to be a model for protection during the construction process, which would be the first for the country, and we also aim to be a model and testing ground for restoration. Again, that would be a first for Oman. So we started identifying which elements actually do need site protection, and this is just a selection of the elements. We realized that there's different levels of control. first construction has started in 2007, so in the past there were some areas where construction happened. If there were damage, then we need to treat them differently to areas where construction is currently ongoing or where future construction will happen. We aim to set a very strong precedent, and the past areas should be restored. Areas where construction currently takes place need to have a special treatment, and it is very important here that we come up with very tight guidelines with procedures and activities, monitoring, briefing of the construction team on site. So all of that will help us to ensure that the site is protected and respected. And then for all future activities, and as I said, the big biomes and the main habitats have not been constructed yet, but will start soon. We need to develop rigorous documents to help us that all areas will have special protection. But we must also think larger. We cannot concentrate on the garden only. We need to think of the bigger picture. We need to think of the area around the garden. And so this triangle, this is the garden site, the 420 hectares, but the areas around the garden, most of it currently is untouched. And this is how it looks like at the moment. So we need to consider not only the current development, but also how the area will look like in a couple of years, and we need to take that into account. And we have now started the process of taking the areas around the garden into consideration and see how much protection we can achieve in that area. Site restoration concepts and principles. I already said that there has been considerable site construction areas already in the past. So again, we identified which areas are already existing on site and which elements exist and need to be either restored, removed, adapted or demolished. We have come up with a site restoration plan. We are refining this at the moment. This is not the final document, but we have identified the areas that need restoration, and we will come up with a plan of what exactly needs to happen in those areas. I will not go into detail here, but it is very important for us to understand, and for us working in botanic gardens, the construction world is quite a world which is different to the world we usually deal with, and certainly for me and my team it was a very steep, also very interesting learning curve. So we need to understand what the contractors demand in their, or what they need in their documents, so that we have control about the quality of the end product. And there is a process from design to construction. These are the different phases of the work. What is very important is that a couple of those phases are very well thought through, and that a lot of effort is put into preparing the relevant documents and the drawings required for that particular phase of work. It is equally important that we have a very strong relationship with the client, which in our case is the botanic garden. So there's a strong relationship between the garden, the consultant, the designer, and the contractor. And everyone needs to share the vision. Everyone needs to understand what we want to achieve with regards to protection and conservation. It is also very important on who approves which step. And so the approval committees need to have people who do understand construction, who do understand project management processes, and understand how construction documents need to be worded. So one of the most valuable investments a client, or in our case a botanic garden, can make is to allocate a lot of effort to produce a very concise request for proposal and contract documents. This does include drawings and specifications. We need very clear and precise method statements, and we need checkpoints of approval during the whole process. In Oman Botanic Garden, we have also already conducted trials in the gravel desert which does exist on site. So this is the area where we will show the Northern Gravel Desert. And construction there, which rather is an enhancement of the existing vegetation rather than construction from new, has started in 2010. This is shortly before construction, or shortly before planting started. Trenches were dug for irrigation and for electricity. What we have done, and we didn't really have anyone to go to and ask. We didn't know whom to ask for advice, so we have developed the methods by ourselves. And I have to say, we all were rather nervous before that started. As you can see, before planting started, we have removed the soil surface, so the gravel, the fine rocks and so on. We have stockpiled them. They were sorted according to color, texture and size. That was a lot of work. We have spaced out the plants, and as you can see, in some areas it is denser, like in the foreground. This is where we have completely removed the gravel surface, and in the background some areas were untouched or almost untouched. Again, spacing out of the plant, and you can see the protective fencing. We made sure that no one goes into the areas which are to remain pristine. And that actually worked really well, because from the start on we were very strict with everyone who was working in that area. It also helped that the client got directly in touch with the construction staff, so we were working together, and that was breaking down the barriers which often do exist between the client and the staff, actually, the contractor staff actually carrying out the work. It is also because we know best how the habitats really need to look like. The contractor doesn't know, but we know, and therefore this has been very important that the Oman Botanic Garden staff has been closely involved. What you can see here is something which I find absolutely amazing. You see that there is limestone meeting metamorphic rock, and that area is after planting and after the soil surface restoration. And it took a couple of team members from Oman Botanic Garden, very artistic team, I have to say. It took them 6 weeks to restore the surface area of the habitat, and after that even I could not tell which areas were the initial habitat and which areas have been restored. So that has been done with a lot of attention to detail, and I have to say it surpassed my highest expectations, the way that worked. Well, this is a seepage on site here. It is, there's no running water, but actually at times after rain there is water dribbling down these little terraces, and you can see how that seepage is embedded into the native landscapes. Well, especially clear this is on the right side. On the left side, as you can see, we had a couple of erosion issues. However, I'm showing this image here because this is not a natural seepage. This is a seepage which was made by a highly specialized contractor out of artificial rock. The natural seepage is actually 5 kilometers away from the garden, and it looks absolutely identical. So it is super work. We were all extremely pleased, and the contractor worked with a lot of attention to detail. This is also because we very much knew what exactly we wanted to have on site as part of that habitat. And it's not really about restoration as such, but it is that how areas like that need to be embedded into the habitats in the garden, and this is an example how this can work very well. It is very important what we do with the information and what we've learned so far and how we share this, and this is why I'm really delighted to be here today. So we have learned quite a few lessons, some the hard way, I have to say, but I guess that is normal. First of all, I would like to point out that this is breaking ground in this part of the world, at least in Oman. This has not been done in the country at all, so there's no experience, no background we can relate to. It is very important to have proper specifications, We highly recommend a pre-bidders workshop so that possible construction companies know what the garden expects. It is important to identify the critical components of protection and restoration. We also highly recommend a watching brief. This means that it is a formal program during the construction process with very close monitoring. It is very important to have the appropriate contractor, especially if a project has such a scale as Oman Botanic Garden. It is a huge task and the contractor needs to be able to deal with it. We have asked previous contractors to provide examples of their capabilities, so they've come up, for example, with that model that was a model for the seepage, which we then inspected. It was approved and served as a reference sample for the construction of the final feature. We have learned more. It is very important that the construction staff is briefed. It is this guy here on the photo. He needs to know and to understand how the areas are to be restored and how they are to be recreated. And in our case, in Oman, that construction briefing would need to happen in different Indian languages, maybe in Urdu as well, and maybe in Nepali. So this is just, if we speak English, they will not understand, and we need to be aware of that and need to factor that in during the construction process. We highly recommend an early warning system because it makes sure that any mistakes are actually not continuing but are stopped rather early. We have also worked with penalty clauses, and maybe you remember that central in the garden we have a peak of about 200 meters, and when construction started we had a construction supervisor sitting on the peak high above all the other habitats in the garden with his binoculars, and when the first trucks were driving off the tracks they were immediately fined, and after the first 5 track drivers were fined, they all suddenly could stay on the tracks. So that does work very well. We equally recommend reward and acknowledgement for good practice. For example, one of our former contractors got an international environmental prize for good practice during construction. It's also the workers. So as I said before, we sometimes have 45 or 50 degrees even in summer, so it is very hard to work outside the full day. So our workers were rewarded with a couple of hours to cool down during lunch break in an air conditioning area, and they were given energy drinks just as a little reward, and these little extras make a lot of difference. It is also very important that the organization, which means that in our case the Botanic Garden, is in a position to deal with the restoration and with the management of the process. You can have very high aspirations, but if the organization is not ready to deal with it, then one may run into difficulties. And very importantly, it is crucial to share the vision, so that garden staff, the design team, the consultants, the contractors, all share the vision and they all know why they're doing what they are doing. So for us it also means a lot of field work, teamwork, trials. This all has been important. In our particular case, we had a very close working relationship of botany and landscape architecture. And except me, there's 2 other staff from Oman Botanic Garden here, Dr. Darragh Lupton, botanist, and Andrew Anderson, landscape architecture, and all 3 of us would be pleased to further discuss our lessons and other lessons learned here with regards to site restoration and protection. From our design consultants as well, they brought in a lot of expertise with regards to restoration, and together we all share the vision of how this can be achieved in Oman Botanic Garden. In our interpretation, we want protection and restoration to become part of it, so that our visitors also understand why this is important, not only for the garden, but for the country and for the region. We aim for leadership in creating sustainable development, and now this is just a starter, but as the garden develops, we will form close relationships with the ministries, the municipalities, with research institutions, so that we can share the lessons we have learned, and that hopefully eventually other construction projects in the country will benefit from the work done in Oman Botanic Garden. The Oman Botanic Garden will also have a demonstration garden that will show what every visitor can do at home in his or her home garden, and this is another area where we will also show an example of restoration on very small scale, so that our visitors will leave the garden with lasting messages of protection, conservation and sustainability. To conclude, the Oman Botanic Garden is a huge and very ambitious project which associated challenges which stem from its novelty and innovation. This is also true for the restoration and site protection which we require until the project will be open to the public. But it is certain that we have the possibility here to create a lasting legacy for the conservation of biodiversity and for very precious landscapes. And we all know and we hope that our next few years will prove to be a very exciting time for us. Thank you very much.